Well, we were able to briefly talk with this professor. We always try to get interviews. A lot of these professors are very busy. We appreciate whatever time they have and whatever questions they were willing to answer. We were able to ask one big question based upon that was very relevant to the research by this professor, and we'll show you what that is. So today we are talking with Jay Van Bavel. He's a professor of psychology and neuroscience at New York University. This was the article that he wrote that got our attention. It was a academic journal article, Speaking My Truth, Why Personal Experiences Can Bridge Divides, Bust, Mislead, came out in 2021. Roughly, there is increasing evidence that people are more susceptible to misinformation and less receptive to factual arguments than we might hope. While fact checks can be effective in some domains, they prove to be very weak antidote for misinformation when it comes to politics. This problem is exacerbated by increasing polarization in the United States and abroad, where partisans express a growing sense of distrust and moral animosity. However, in a new paper by PNAS, Cuban et al. Offer a strategy for bridging political divides. Across an impressive series of 15 studies, the authors clarify how expressions of personal experience can garner respect from people across the political divide. The power of experience, there can be a great power in sharing personal experience or stories which can humanize people who have otherwise been marginalized or forgotten. Majority of people mistakenly assume that basing their beliefs about a polarized issue like same-sex marriage or abortion or facts will garner the respect of someone who disagrees with them. In reality, people are more likely to respect their political opponents and even see them as more rational if they base their moral positions on personal experience. What he's talking about is that, and we saw this in the interview with Lee Jussum, and we also saw this, I believe, in the interview with Professor Rios. If you have productive quality interactions from someone at the other side, it can reduce barriers. You can also have unproductive, not well organized conversations with the other side that only increase and exacerbate barriers. But there is some research saying that you can have kind of a quality interaction with someone who thinks differently, and it will reduce the polarization if done correctly. Everybody who talks about how to fix the polarization says you have to do these interactions correctly. You can't just put two people in a room and expect it to work out. It doesn't work out that way. There's specific things that have to happen and the specific mechanisms that have to occur in order for the interaction to be productive. This is one aspect of that. This particular journal is building on top of that, and then it's saying the way that you can bridge the divide is by having people tell personal stories to each other so that you can begin to understand the person and why this person thinks and feels the way they do based upon stories they told you that informed their life story. So instead of going, Marcus is a Republican, he must love guns because he likes killing people, I would tell a story about how my grandpa was in World War II, and late at night, he would tell me stories and show me how to polish his gun. And it was a family bonding event. And so my connection to guns, which I don't really have, but in the story, was more about family and coming together. And it wasn't killing folks that motivated me to have a gun collection. That's a personal story. It explains how I came to feel about a political issue from my personal background. And it provides a different narrative than the one the mainstream media might. That this is that. So that's the idea. If you can share a personal story about how you got to your political opinions in a quality manner, it can reduce political polarization. So, but again, I want to add, everybody who's talked about reducing political polarization through these forms of interactions has said they have to be done perfectly. If you do not do them right, it could be even worse. There's no just put people together. It's like, okay, you can do surgery correctly, or I could just give you a scalpel and you could start cutting things open and seeing what happens. One results in a dead person. One results in a person with an illness getting better. Both involve a hand and a scalpel, but if you're not doing it right, you get really different results. That's what I'm hearing about these interactions. So he's saying there's a way to do interactions, personal stories between each other, between people, and that can bring people together. Okay. So I asked them one question. Do you see any reason to think that political polarization in America will calm down naturally on its own without some giant intervention? So, Professor, you're talking about how to calm down political polarization, and you're saying here's a way to do that, a giant intervention. If we don't do the giant intervention you suggest, if we don't do any sort of giant intervention, do you see a reason to believe that in the future political polarization will calm down without some superordinate giant intervention? Nope. I know, tongue in cheek, minimum amount of time answering, but it is still a response. This is the professor who wrote this study. He's an expert in political polarization, and he studied how to bring people together. And I said, if we don't do something that's very big, large effort to bring everybody together, and we just kind of keep going as it is, do you think things naturally will calm down on their own anytime in the future? No. The guy who wrote about how to bring everybody together in one of the most recent research white papers on how to bring people together and end the political divide says, if we don't do something big, I don't see how it's ever going to get fixed naturally on its own. And that is from this professor. So small data point, but important data point. Here's a professor looking at how to bring people together. Do we have to do this? Can't we just wing it and let it work out on its own? Nope. It's going to get worse if you don't do anything. And there's no reason to believe it'll naturally fix itself. That's what he said. Okay, we'll be back with more interviews. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.